Hi, everybody. My name is Jolene Shaw. I'm the General Manager for Knowledge Pele, and I will be presenting a presentation that I gave at the Democracy Works Foundation's third cross-provincial workshop. And the topic is around understanding participation opportunities related to the SED spend of IPPs. Okay, so I'd like to start with just introducing Knowledge Pele as a company before getting into the detail that I know everybody is more interested in. But Knowledge Pele is a development company with experience in social research, economic development advisory, and we implement development programs and projects. We work primarily in vulnerable communities across the world, and in the South African context, what we would know to be township, peri-urban, and rural communities. And we deliver the work through raising and managing private capital to invest in historically excluded communities. The intention of our work is to deliver both financial and social returns, and we align ourselves to a few sustainable development goals, specifically quality education, decent work and economic growth, clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, industry innovation, infrastructure, and sustainable cities and communities. Generally across the board, we also align to gender equality and climate change, but the ones that I've mentioned are more specific to the actual work that we do. Okay, so a little bit about our footprint. We have presence across South Africa in almost all provinces, and have been working in some provinces since 2013 and 2014. And I will go into a little bit more detail on one of our case studies. But this just gives you an idea of our footprint in the country. And then we also have a hydroponic farm in Costa Rica. So that is our expansion into other countries. Okay, so the case study that I mentioned, I would just like to contextualize what I've just spoken about into the case study of Toaster Feed, which is a community in the Western Cape where we've been positioned the longest. So, like I said, we've been in Toaster Feed for since 2013, and we started off just conducting research in Toaster Feed, and this was to really understand the needs and the needs of the community and their current assets. In terms of our human focus, we focused our SED investment on the development of human capabilities through skills development programs. From an infrastructure perspective, we invest in social infrastructure for clean energy at schools, so taking schools off the grid by providing solar installations, and then also reintroducing industry into these communities. We know that, especially in the renewable energy space, the communities in which we operate are on the outskirts of big cities, and therefore, to get people active in the industry, again, it is important to potentially introduce new industry, and we've done this through the creation of a hydroponic farm in the area, which currently employs 10 people. Okay, so just a little bit more detail around some of the projects, but I won't spend too much time on these, as I have mentioned them. In the human capital development arm of our business, we have various skills development programs, bursary programs, work experience programs, and something that we are very keen on, renewable energy training as well. And you can see how many participants to date we have that have participated within our programs. Social infrastructure, so helping schools get off the grid by providing them with solar installations. And then finally, as I had mentioned, industrial development through the hydroponic farm. This hydroponic farm was the first one that we implemented in South Africa. We have two in Costa Rica, and we are hoping to expand this Toaster Feed one, and also possibly start a new one in the Northern Cape. Okay. So that's just a little bit about Knowledge Pele itself. And now I'd just like to touch on a little bit of the context in which we are operating. We all understand the challenges that we are faced with. and why this work is often not the easy work that we're doing. So I'd just like to spend a little bit of time on that. So at Knowledge Pele, we use the National Development Plan as sort of the baseline to measure our success against. Some of you might ask, why the National Development Plan? Does anyone still remember that we have a National Development Plan? But the truth is that this is the framework that exists within the country. Although we haven't been very good as a country in achieving some of the targets within the NDP, it still is a very good framework for what we're trying to achieve. And specifically for the renewable energy sector, the NDP articulates the country's transition to a low carbon economy and also emphasizes the importance of development of communities and in particular rural communities. So in South Africa, the Renewable Energy Independent Power Producer Procurement Program, REAP, was formalized in 2011, and South Africa has become a leader in its investments in renewable energy. However, the inception of the sector also coincided with regressions in socioeconomic outcomes. So although there was this massive investment in the country, we still saw a decline in lots of the socioeconomic outcomes that affect our communities, and particularly our poorer communities on the outskirts or in the outskirt areas of our country. So appreciating then the role of the REAP in the NDP, as I mentioned, there is a specific focus on the development of rural communities within the NDP, and the REAP has been a huge success in driving some of the investment. But because it coincided with some of these key regressions in the economy and society, the work became a lot more difficult to do. And as a result, the IPP office, so the state, reduced the amount of administration fees or the administration budget that IPPs were allowed to spend on managing the socioeconomic spend in these communities. And why this is important to mention is because it also gives us a little bit of insight into why certain IPPs become very stringent on some of the requirements that they have of organizations when it comes to reporting, and particularly reporting on impact, because with minimizing that budget, we have to do more with less money, essentially. So there is a growing focus on development practice within the REAP, and particularly attention is given to stakeholder engagement and community participation as central issues driving the lower than expected development outcomes that we have seen. So just a little bit more detail around the monitoring note 6, which is the note that came out from the IPP office to say that the admin costs that IPPs are allowed to draw from the budgets cannot exceed 10% of the committed obligations. Again, creating a situation where you have to do more with a lot less. And inevitably, from an IPP perspective, that then gets cascaded down to the organizations that are implementing the programs. Okay, so like I said, that was a good segue into the next section, which speaks to the decision-making processes of IPPs within this context that we have to work. The pressure from the IPP office, the decrease in the administration fee that's allowed, and plus the need to report on good development outcomes. Okay, sorry. So it's just a little bit more context on some of the key policy messages that can assist co-creation opportunities and challenges. We know that that SED and ED spend could enable 19,000 individuals to access education-related programs and create almost 5,000 jobs. However, there needs to be better guidance from REAP projects to deliver the anticipated level of significant benefits. And number 3, lastly, with the focus on stakeholder engagement, there is a requirement to put a lot more emphasis on ensuring that communities are more involved in the projects that are directed towards them. So from an IPP perspective, some of the challenges that we face when appointing organizations to implement some of the work, and in this section, really just giving guidance to how you could potentially overcome some of those challenges and the reason why they are important in the context that we're operating in. The first challenge is effective expenditure, once again linked to that decrease in admin costs. And how can you overcome these in your approach? Is that when you're applying for funding, show that there's sustainability in your approach, that you're thinking of a long-term approach, which will have deeper impact. And then when we report on impact, it can actually show that a real change has been affected. And it's not just about numbers at the end of the day. Secondly, the challenge is in community disruptions and stakeholder engagement. So in your proposals, the way to overcome these is to show your expertise in engaging communities meaningfully. So obviously the outcome linked to that is that a community that is engaged throughout the program will have a positive view of the project and of the IPP and feel satisfied with the proposed outcomes. And in some instances, even express loyalty. We have found that as KP, the longer you are in a community, you have ebbs and flows of community buy-in. Obviously, we know that not everyone can be pleased, but I think from the perspective of showing your expertise in this space, it is really important to see that you can engage with communities meaningfully and with different levels of people in community. Then thirdly, the big question of impact, right? This is something that has been present in the development space for a very, very long time. How do we measure what we are doing? And can organizations, do they actually have the capacity and the skills to measure the work that is done? So whether as a CBO, an NGO, you already have this capacity, or advice would be to build this capacity within your organization. Have a strong M&E focus in your reporting. So M&E plays a crucial role in ensuring accountability, improving program effectiveness, and facilitating evidence-based decision-making. And this one is really key. And then, as I've already mentioned, it goes beyond the numbers. So it's also about being able to show the impact qualitatively. So both of those need to be expressed. The other challenge is revenue changes. So as an IPP, you do have certain revenue changes. The revenue is linked to the asset that you have. So if the sun is not shining as much, if the wind is not blowing on a particular time, that has an impact on the revenues that are generated. And these are often things that are outside of your control. So when you build out your budgets, have a flexibility within your programs. And this can show that you are adaptable and agile, and that you can be continuously in alignment with the needs of the IPP and that of the community. Obviously, I'm not talking about large scale changes in budget, because none of us could be able to operate like that, but just build in a little bit of flexibility in your programs. Then we have, the next one is deficient coordination. So because a lot of these IPP projects are situated in rural areas, you'll find an oversaturation of a particular area where you would have quite a number of solar or wind assets overlapping the 50-kilometer beneficiary radius from the operations. So it is also good to show in your approach that you can collaborate with other programs on the ground or other IPPs. So the collaboration can foster innovation, efficiencies, shared learning, problem solving, relationship building, and obviously increasing the resources to positively impact the community. The REAP has been, as I said earlier on, it's been cemented since 2011 as a government program. So we've had quite a few years to understand how these communities operate, what are the kind of issues within these communities. And we know that we cannot do anything by ourselves, or at least in the very least, to take things a bit further and to make sure that we increase those resources to a particular area, we need to be able to collaborate. So to show that experience and ability to collaborate would also be very appealing to an IPP. Okay, just the last few. Exit strategies it's also a challenge. Some in programs or organizations that are supported, we know cannot be supported for an extended period of time. And therefore there will be points, either if it's not working very well, or if they've gotten to a point where the program or the organization can be sustainable on its own, that we would need to exit the program. So it'd be very good, even as you apply for funding or send in a proposal, to identify potential timelines for exit of programs, and consider what dependencies there would be once that exit strategy is implemented. So a good exit strategy can lead to smooth transitions, risk mitigation, new opportunities, reputation building, and on the legacy of the actual program. Just the second last one, improve data availability and accuracy on projects. This is again linked to the M&E point, but often we find that reporting is not accurate, or is not a true depiction of the impact that is created. I think that the improvements in data will allow for better planning. So it's better to show what really is happening on the ground, so that an IPP can make a decision to pivot if required, or spend the money in a more impactful way. So to really give an accurate account of what is occurring on the ground, and again, presenting the data both quantitatively and qualitatively. So for the last point, what should be remembered is that many IPPs are from outside South Africa. So you're reporting to a board that doesn't necessarily know the South African context, or only has a good idea of the global frameworks against which we measure development, the Sustainable Development Goals being the most prominent one. So the challenge that we've seen is that there can be a lack of alignment to programs, to the broader global and local frameworks. And we know our focus is primarily on communities and what is happening in the communities and reporting on that. But if you can show or align your programs to broader development frameworks, it strengthens the necessity of the initiative and places the IPP more firmly in a development discourse. Often also the employee complement of these IPPs is very technical people, or people who have not worked in development. We're obviously seeing an improvement of that as the REAP program has gone on. But still, to ensure that they understand the development discourse, it would be good to create that alignment. So it is useful for a board to understand the impact of the programs, or an organization that is considering their broader ESG objectives as well. Okay, so some of the summarized key considerations is to help the IPP create alignment with the needs and expectations of the beneficiary community, maximize impact in utilizing stakeholder engagement as a vehicle to enhance economic development, growth, and job creation. And then, as I said, very important, exploring those economic multipliers to ensure that we increase economic participation. Okay, so thank you very much. Again, these are my contact details if you want to know anything more about the experience of an IPP. And because Knowledge Pele also implements on the ground, we're well positioned to understand those dynamics. So thank you very much for taking the time to listen to this.